Italy? Whiskey? Ah, Italy beer! You could never unlock my secret. Oh no! Suddenly, hello, Libby! Let's begin. Indeed.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and this is the Fireside Chat. And today I am blessed with two guests. Micah Carroll is here to tell his story, and Arvis Owens is doing like support, I guess. he's there to support.
Color commentating.
Yes, to help us sort of stay on track so we don't get distracted. So, this is part of what appears to be turning into a series, which I totally am fine with, of speaking with various victims of, false allegations, or at least victims of getting a lack in due process in the military. And so we're gonna hear Micah's story. So first of all, welcome to the show, both you guys. How are you guys doing?
Doing
I'm
well. Thank you
having
for having us on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we'll just start with your story, Micah. It's kind of it's crazy. It sounds crazy from what I heard. So tell us what happened. Where did it all begin?
So the beginning is joined the Air Force in '98, intelligence by trade, deployed quite often. It was, as you know, and most people know, a lot of conflicts throughout the world, and we were constantly traveling around the world to police humanity. But one of my deployments in 2009 to Afghanistan, I had a gut feeling based on conversations with my wife that there wasn't something right about her situation at home. I felt like she was becoming more and more distant, and I just had a feeling she was not being faithful. And towards the end of my deployment, I talked to my commander, told him about the situation, and he agreed to let me go home a few weeks early to see if I could try and salvage my marriage and figure out what was going on. I didn't tell any of my family that I was going home early. I just went, and I got home. Nice surprise, nice reunion. Hanging out with my kids. My kids informed me that there was a man that had been coming over to the house and hanging out and staying the night. And of course, I confronted my wife about it, and she proceeded to tell me that she had been having an affair and that she was going to leave with him and start a new life. So
Let's back up for a second.
Okay.
So was this going on because you were like maybe on deployment or something, or you were like away for periods of time? I mean,
I can't really speak for her, but most people have affairs due to loneliness, probably, and maybe lack of relationship with their significant other. Being that I had deployed, that would have been my sixth deployment, I believe, in 10 years. Um, I'm sure that had something to do with it. Being gone all the time. I had just deployed for a year to the desert in 2008. I got home in May of 2008. The military moved us from Colorado to Alaska in November of 2008. And then in February of 2009, I deployed to Afghanistan. So it was just like back to back, and I knew that our relationship wasn't the greatest, and I wasn't the best husband. I'll freely admit that, but I just knew that I probably shouldn't go on this deployment, and I asked the Air Force to find somebody to replace me for this 2009 Afghanistan trip, and they refused to do it. And well, that bit me in the booty.
Yeah. Okay, so your wife was disloyal, and part of it had to do with you weren't like, and I'm not even blaming you for it because this is just the nature of the beast. Like, you wanted to serve your country, so this is what you did. She knew this when she got entered, into the relationship, right? I mean, and then I guess she was surprised that that meant that you weren't gonna always be around. And this isn't like, again, I'm not praising or condemning anything. I'm just stating the reality of the situation. So she cheated on you, and then she told you about it. What? Just out of curiosity, what gave you the sense that something was wrong?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that she shouldn't have been surprised about anything because she was active duty herself. So, um,
Mm,
and she actually had been in the military longer than me, about 2 years longer than me. So, she knew exactly what she was getting into. And so I'm not going to defend her at all on that, right?
right.
But it's just one of those gut feelings, and I was intelligence. I did, some human behavior specialty type stuff while I was active duty, and um, I have that instinct going for me. But I also think it's just natural if for us humans to sense when something's not right, and I knew that our relationship prior to this deployment is pretty normal. We had a pretty good relationship. We're both athletic. We both had the same aspirations, the same goals in life. Both, loved to snowboard, and I mean, we just had a good connection. And when that connection seems like something is being wedged in between, you know, in between you know that there's something outside of our relationship that's affecting your connection, and that's what I felt when I was in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So okay. So you find out what happens next.
So she moves out, and she left me and my 3 children at the house and took off with this guy.
So she
Now,
just left, no divorce papers, no court battle, no nothing.
apparently
Okay.
that was going to come later. She had a place to stay and she didn't want to be with me anymore, so she left. Well, for whatever reason, that only lasted a week and a half, and she came back and she said, "I've changed my mind. You are the man that I want. Let's start over and try this again if you'll have me." And I'm like, "Okay." So we did, and to symbolize a new start, I don't even know if that's a thing or not, but we did it. We moved to a different house and to a different town in Alaska, and to try and have a new start, a fresh start. And shortly after we moved into our new house, she got orders to deploy. Well, that um, really disappointed me because the man that she was having an affair with was in her unit and he was to deploy with her. And I just wasn't going to allow that to happen. So I went to her leadership to say, "Hey, look, here's what happened while I was deployed. And now you're trying to deploy her with the same guy, and I just would appreciate it if you would either take her or him off of this deployment so they're not going and hanging out again and ripping our family apart again." Um,
Is this kind of thing normal? Like, I mean, I know that, like if this was a civilian workplace, there'd be, it's like a conflict of interest. There could be some issues, especially if the relationship goes sour. In companies, they usually separate people if it comes to that. So is this sort of like abnormal that they would deploy her with this guy?
well, they weren't aware of the affair.
Oh, they weren't. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, And was it a good idea for me to go to her leadership? I don't know. Looking back, it really didn't do anything. I actually kind of got in trouble a little bit from my leadership for doing that. I didn't get any type of um, paperwork of any kind. They just kind of scolded me like you shouldn't have done that. Obviously, my wife was not happy that I did that. Um, in the end, however, Nick was his name. He ended up getting taken off of the deployment. I don't know if that had anything to do with what I did or some other reason, or he felt bad because I did have some confrontations with him. Maybe he was like, maybe I shouldn't do this to this guy anymore. I don't
Mm,
know. But he didn't go on the deployment, and that made me feel better about her deploying to Guam at that time. Yes.
yeah, yeah. All right. Okay. So you took her back, and then this deployment thing happened. Did you take out of curiosity again, because we do talk a lot about this stuff? Did you take her back because you, and if you don't feel comfortable answering this question, I understand, so you can just tell me. Um, did you take her back because you thought that you could make it work for your sake, like you wanted her back, or did you do it because there were children involved and you felt that, for the kids, because a lot of people do that where they have problems in their marriage, but there's children and they're like, we got to stay together for the kids, and they make it work that way. Do you know what your impetus was, or hers
So
for that matter?
yeah, so I am a believer in Jesus. I am a Christian man. I believe in grace and mercy and forgiveness. And I don't, I try my best not to be a judgmental person. And because of those beliefs and values, I knew myself. Was and am not a perfect person. I make mistakes all the time. I I loved her. I really, truly did. And it was obviously extremely hurtful what she was doing, but I believed 100% that if we came back together and did things the right way, we could reconcile and have a healthy marriage, healthy family life moving forward. That was my mindset.
Sure.
Um, and I convinced her. I suppose I convinced her of that, or again, I really don't know why she came back. I don't know what her mindset was, or Nick's mindset, or why they decided to split. I don't know. Uh, but at that time, it didn't really matter to me. All that matters is that she was back and she was willing to work on our marriage, and I
Right.
was grateful for that
Yeah. Yeah.
at the time.
All right. So you get back together, and she's like back on her, like back doing the things that she was doing before. Is that what happened?
So while she was deployed,
Mm-hmm.
um, that same behavior was kind of there. And I questioned her about it, and she's like, no, we're just taking advantage of this Guam environment. We're going on a lot of hikes and fishing excursions and boat trips and just exploring in our off time. And I'm sorry, I'll try to do better about calling and so on and so forth. Well, and I was like, okay, that's fine. But then one of the wives of somebody else in her unit called me and said, hey, I was told that my husband and your wife are having an affair over there in Guam, and I figured you should know about it. And of course, that just threw me for a loop. And
Mm-hmm.
at that time is the time where I decided to buy a quote unquote nanny cam for my house for her return, and so I could get proof of this. So I knew in my mind that it was happening, and then I could then figure out what I was going to do, whether I was going to give her one more chance or whether I was going to just immediately file for divorce. I didn't know at that time. I wanted proof first,
Mm-hmm.
my own proof. And then if I did decide to get a divorce, then I would have, this evidence that of multiple affairs, and I could take it before the court and get full custody. This is what was going on in my mind. And I just needed to know what was happening so I could make the decision for my future.
Right. So you got a nanny cam. It's sort of like a hidden camera, and
It was
and you set it up in like the
in my bedroom.
bedroom. Yeah. And then it was sort of like what, wait and see kind
Yeah.
of a thing.
And
Yeah.
I would check it, once a week, once every 2 weeks, something. Whenever I got the opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
I would check it. And
Okay.
somewhere in the summertime of 2010 is when I saw that she had brought a man into the house. Now, this was a motion activated still photo camera. It wasn't a video recording type of camera. It just took photos. And I took that and confronted her with it. And of course, she was denying it. And she didn't know, obviously, that I didn't tell her that I had a hidden camera. I just said, "Hey, are you still having an affair? Are you talking to anybody? What's going
Yeah.
on?" She denied it the whole time. And then she started leaving. I'm going to the grocery store, but instead, the grocery store was, a couple miles. She would be gone for 3 hours, and at that time, I didn't have any tracking type, find my phone type applications, or
Yeah.
technology. So um, I was just rolling with it, trying my best to be a father and a better husband, and it just didn't work out. And she eventually filed for divorce. I believe it was in September of 2010, and we moved forward with divorce, and I moved
So
out.
so she got caught and then she filed for divorce.
Correct.
So she initiated. And when she got caught, what were you hoping for in terms of like an outcome? Were you just hoping that she would just be like, "Yeah, that's me. I did it. I'm sorry." And then I'm gonna change or whatever, or like I don't know. I'm just curious. Like what because I can already see where this is going just based on how she took initiative to file after this, because I don't know if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So I was kind of taken back when she told me she wanted to get a divorce. And I w- I guess you could say I was still fighting for the marriage. I was still of the belief, and I loved her that much that we could still figure this out. There's something that wasn't right, whether it was me or whether it was her. Something wasn't right that we needed to fix, and if we could just fix that and come back together, then we could make this work. And I'll be honest with you, I see things a little bit different now. Staying together in a marriage for children was not my mindset at that time. I was more concerned about what I wanted, and I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
be with her. I wanted my wife. I wanted my family whole and together. Um, I wasn't thinking I need to save this. It's the best thing for my children. I mean, that was part of it, but that wasn't the main thought going through my mind.
Sure.
I was devastated. I love that woman. And
Mm-hmm.
um I just I think that for her, and looking back and going through all the counseling sessions and talking to my mom knew her really well. Uh she was very selfish and self-centered. Um person, and I believe that played a large part as to why she was doing what she was doing, because she was all about her and what she wanted in life. And was she a good mom? Yes. Was she a good wife? Mostly. Um, but
Arvis is shaking his head down there.
now that I can see back in
Yeah.
time, and I can look back at the chain of events and our whole 12 years of being together, she was very, very selfish human being.
Mhm.
And it was and I was too. Obviously, we all are to some extent, and then it takes time for us to mature as we get older, and we realize that, we need to do things different and put others before ourselves. But I think she was a little farther along in the self-centeredness than most people are at that
Mhm.
time in their life. So
Yeah.
uh,
All right. So what happened next? Like, so she filed for divorce. I want to get to the part where, well, why we're here. So what happened next?
so when she threw that on me is when I confronted her about what I had.
Oh, okay. Your evidence, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
And this guy, you said it was a gentleman. It wasn't the same guy. This is like a different guy.
a different
Like,
guy.
okay, all right.
Yeah. And it's still in her same unit. They were all in the same unit
Hmm.
together.
You run
And
somebody's unit, but
yeah. Arvis, you want to piggyback on that one?
I will piggyback, and you know what? I've been listening, sitting on my hands. Micah is amazing. He's so kind, to where I put her in the bad wife category, because not only does she have the one, she has the second one, and he's on deployment. He is, risking his life. He can't do the mission. He's a danger to himself and his unit. And then she puts him up for a peeping Tom violation, right? She basically mischaracterizes why the video's there. She says that he did it for sexual gratification, and they know she's had the affairs. So
Mhm.
I put her in the bad wife category, Micah,
Well,
because of that.
right. Sure. We're not to that point yet, but yes, I
Okay,
see
I
where we're
just wanted,
going.
I was sitting here, okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right,
yeah.
as long as we're going to get there.
We're getting there.
We're
Yeah.
getting
I'm
there. We're
building
getting
up
there.
to it. Yeah. So, um, so I confront her about this person, and she's just done at this point. She's ready to move forward with this guy and get a divorce. And I had no choice but to just do it. So we get the divorce, and in Alaska, uh, it doesn't take a lot to get a divorce. You file paperwork, and within 30 days, you have a letter in the mail from the judge saying you are divorced. Congratulations, move
Mhm.
forward, press on with life. So the child custody stuff, when we had submitted a parenting plan and we both lived in the same area within 5 miles of each other. So in Alaska, they were very gracious with the child custody. We had 50-50, everything. Kids went back and forth all the time. Everything was gravy, so on and so forth. However, I deployed again in 2012, and I got orders to Texas while on this deployment. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to Texas without my children. I want full custody. I don't believe Holly uh, having an affair in the house with in front of my children while their father is out of the country. To me, that's just terrible parenting. I would never do anything like that. And so I was of the mindset, I'm going to use this, uh, the fact that I caught her having an affair, and this is the second affair. I'm going to use that in court in our custody battle to get full custody of my children. And I signed an affidavit, and on that affidavit, it was a very simple sentence. I caught my ex-wife cheating on me with a hidden camera. Signed. That is what I got convicted of. Was an indecent recording under the 120 Charlie charge, whatever is that, Arvis. You'll have to help me out with the terminology.
Right. So 120 is a catch-all, Article 120, and then there's A, B, and C. So basically, the way I explain it is, it's the peeping Tom statute. So if someone were to put a camera inside of a women's restroom, for instance, or a shower, so it's all about intent, though, Brian. So it's the military knew she had had multiple affairs. She admitted it, right? So they went to court arguing that his intention for putting the camera there was sexual gratification when they knew that was not true.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is we're talking about the military courts
Yes.
still?
Yes,
Okay.
we are.
Kind of
All right,
skipped
just-
ahead a little bit, but
Yeah, it's okay.
so in that child custody battle happened in 2012 in the state of Alaska. I eventually lost that custody battle. She got full custody because I would be in Texas and she was staying in Alaska, and they thought it was in the best interest of the children to stay with their mother, like most courts do. So I moved to Texas, and then about a year later, my ex-wife and her new husband, of whom the same guy she was having an affair with, moved to Utah, and then we had to go adjust our visitation with the courts based on that. And so then my children would visit me during the summers down in Texas, and which was perfectly fine. You know, that was great. We had a great time. Well, during a 2014 visitation, my children informed me that they wanted to move to Texas to be with me and my new fiance, Erica. And I was like, okay, great. Just when you get back home, talk to your mom about it, and let's start the conversation and see if we can't work it out. Well, they were like, well, we don't want to talk to her about it. We want you to. We're scared. She gets mad. And yeah.
How old were the kids at this point? Out of
So
curiosity.
this was in 2014. So I had a 13-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 10-year-old.
Okay.
And they're old enough to kind of know at that point, and the courts somewhere around the age of between 10 and 11, 12 time, the courts will listen to a child's testimony and sometimes let them make the decision of which parent they want to live with. Well, since they were scared, I was like, okay, well, let's just write a letter to her, and while you're here, and then you can take it home with you, and then when you go to school, you can just set it on the kitchen counter for her to see it and read it, and then let her read it, and then you guys let her cool down during the day while you're at school, and then when you get home from school, maybe then you can talk about it. So that's what they did. Well, my two older daughters did. My son, 10-year-old, he didn't really want to write anything. He said, let me just ride this wave with my sisters and we'll see what happens. So, well, my ex-wife got mad, obviously, yelled and screamed at him, tore the letters up, threw them in the trash, and then the next day took them shopping, bought them all brand new snowboards and all kinds of stuff, and convinced them to stay in Utah with her. And then a year later, I am brought up on charges for indecent recording, and eventually convicted. And
so how going? Let's get to the case then. Okay, so
Okay.
Indecent recording. I've seen some things going around where this kind of stuff would fall under the category of what people call revenge porn. If you know what that is. It's more like an internet thing, but it's essentially sort of like, let's say you are, you're a girl, you're a young lady, and you put your, sexual content online, and then somebody shares it, even though it's online. And so, there's a gray area there, because if it's on the internet, then it's on the internet. But there are ways that these people would like that people who feel that they're victims of this will, exploit the system. Yeah, go ahead, Arvis. What were you going to say?
And I'm familiar with that statute. What I want to say in Micah's case, though, he didn't share it with anyone, right? And again, what most people don't realize is that the law is intent. So she knew what she had done. She knew why, and she even admitted in court. So she's called to testify, but the military won't let the jury hear that she's having an affair. So he can't introduce that as evidence. They excuse them out, and she admits she's having an affair. And oh yeah, you know what the guy does? He says they weren't. So one of them perjured themselves in a military court, and the other admitted to adultery. What I want your audience to realize is the military can send you to jail and give you a dishonorable discharge for adultery. But if you're a victim of sexual assault, then all is forgiven. So what some people do is they use it as a get out of jail free card. So they know they could be prosecuted, and so they will charge someone else. And once they're designated a victim, true or not, all of their sins are forgiven, so to speak. And so, again, going back, the prosecutor knew she had an affair. She admitted it, had those multiple affairs. The court knew, but the jury did not. And so they argued a story that they knew wasn't true. They go, hey, he did this for sexual gratification, right? And he was not allowed to defend himself and say, no, my wife was having an affair, and they knew that information. And then they took that to send this man to jail, give him a bad discharge, and then now he's on the sex offender registry for the rest of his life. I want you to find a person living in this country who believes that that's fair, that that's justice, because in no justice that I've ever been a part of is it. And I just want to draw attention to the pressure the military was on, Senator Gillibrand and others, to get a conviction in a case like that, right? They knew the evidence pointed to something different, but they put it aside and said, no, he was doing this for sexual gratification. So not revenge porn, not peeping Tom. His wife was having multiple affairs.
Right.
He had gotten information, and again, they knew it, Brian. That's the thing. It's one thing not to know, right? It's to argue a story without knowing the truth. But when you know the truth, you know what she was doing, and you do that, you make her and him, her new husband, the victim. They get VA benefits. They get forgiven of any, they call it collateral misconduct that they've done. And they help them with job employment and things like that post-military. And then contrast that to what that does. Micah is the victim.
Absolutely.
In every county in this country, Micah Carroll is the victim. And you have to ask yourself, if the American people can't trust the military to be fair with their sons, then how can they keep you safe? 3 questions to explain that. If the best and brightest, and I'm talking about on the men's side, if they know that they won't be treated fairly, will they join? I say no. Second question. If the best and brightest who are in, because some are going to join, if they join and find out they won't be treated fairly, will they stay in? I say no. And then last question, it's if the best and brightest won't join, and the best and brightest will leave when they find out they won't be treated fairly, who will be left to defend you? And do you feel safe now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of evidence, Brian, I was convicted with the only piece of evidence being my signed affidavit. They confiscated my laptops, my phones, everything. They looked everywhere, tried to find anything else to convict me of and to throw me away forever, or to find this video or find evidence that I had distributed this picture of my wife with another man, which, by the way, they were fully clothed. I never had a picture of them without any clothes on, by the way. That's another key piece of information in this. I got convicted of a sexual crime when there was zero sexual activity and there was zero evidence of anything. They convicted me based on an affidavit of me saying I caught my wife cheating on me with a hidden camera. That's it.
That's insane. Like that I mean like it that is insane. And it seems to me just another example of essentially in this case the military, they just want this to go away, so they just like, and they don't want to look bad, right? They don't want to be a stain on them, so they throw you under the bus essentially, and they just go through the case as quickly as possible. Did you well, real quick before I continue, I want to ask people, if you're watching, send us a super chat or a super chow if you have a question or statement for our guests, Micah Carroll, or Arvis Owens. Appreciate it, guys, and thank you for joining the call or this show. So, what happened next? Arvis, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
I want to add to that, because not only what the military did to Micah was horrendous, they've done it to thousands of other men just like Micah. Yeah. I want to say that. And then the second thing, and I'll be quiet for a little bit, is that what's terrible on top of that is Micah still lives in the state of Texas. He applied to be removed from the registry based on how he was convicted. And I don't want to put words in their mouth, but the gist of it was they said, yeah, we don't believe you deserve to be on, but we're going to keep you on as a courtesy to the military. So that's how even worse this thing goes, is that people outside of the military know how wrong it is, and they allow the injustice to get worse.
Yeah.
I have a very good relationship with the sheriff in my county, and most of the people that work under him, because I have to go there multiple times a year to renew paperwork, to renew driver's license, so on and so forth. And they are all on my side. They actually helped me write my packet to the Department of Public Safety in the state of Texas to remove me from the registry, because they believed, based on all the information, and the sheriff department was given my part of my record of trial, the conviction sheet and all that stuff. And the exact words, Arvis, were from the response from the Department of Public Safety in the state of Texas was, we are going to honor the Air Force's decision. We are not in a position to overturn any decision made in a military court of law, which is baloney, right? They do have the power, and they are in the position to say, hey, this isn't right. This person is now a civilian living in the state of Texas under our purview. We do have the authority to remove Micah from the registry, but they didn't want to admit that for whatever reason. It's like any case, and Arvis, you can attest to this, any case that involves sexual misconduct, very few people in leadership positions want to step up and do the right thing to help men as myself that have been in this position, that are being railroaded by the system. It's a very sad story.
So I just want to say this to further support what Mike is saying is, not only do we know that the state of Texas could do this, we have another young man who lives in the same city, was in the same service, was also falsely accused, and the state of Texas removed him from the registry. So I know they could. The state of Virginia removed me when they investigated my case and said, wait a minute. And again, I still have the conviction, because what the military does is, not only do you get convicted, you get something called titled. And I want your listeners to understand, even if they were to take a Chapter 10 where they were administratively separated, or if they go to non-judicial punishment, we call that Article 15, they will still put something in your record to make you titled, which looks like you were convicted. So we have men who were found not guilty in court. They still can't find employment because they're titled and it looks like they were convicted. They can't buy a firearm. They can't join police departments. They can't work with children. They can't sponsor a foreign spouse to be a U.S. citizen. There are so many different things that they do. And again, they know. They know.
Yeah.
And I know they didn't review my case, the Department of Public Safety, because about 2 to 3 hours after I sent my package to the DPS, I got a response. There's no way they could have reviewed the case and made a decision in that time. I think it's a matter of who you get when you get them, and what kind of mood they're in, whether they're willing to even do their job or not.
Yeah. All right. So what happened? What happened next? I want to get to the conviction and how fast that moved, what the standards were of evidence, and if you like made an appeal, if you've been fighting back, if you gave up, that kind of thing.
So I don't remember the exact number of days. Um, the court martial lasted, I believe it was 5, maybe 6 days. Seemed like a long trial. I was convicted of nine months, or sentenced to 9 months incarceration, and required to register on the sex offender registry, and reduced in rank to senior airman and given a bad conduct discharge. Not dishonorable. Bad conduct is the next step up. Not that that matters too much. The repercussions are about the same. But so I was incarcerated in San Antonio on Lackland Air Force Base in their small little jail for about 2 months, and then they transferred me to California, where I spent the next 5 months. I was released. I was sentenced to 9 months. I was released at 7 months. Got back to Texas on January 6th of 2017, and I had 72 hours, I think they gave me, or was it 48? I don't remember, but I had to report to the sheriff's office within a couple days, or there would be a warrant out for my arrest. And I had no career. I had no job. I wasn't waking up and putting the uniform on anymore. I was severely depressed, spending 15, 16, 17 hours in bed every day. My current wife was not happy about that. She was concerned, but also irritated at the same time, because I was just a blob in her house. And
so this was the woman after the woman you divorced.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And it was a very difficult struggle for me for a good year before I finally started coming around, working, having social life again, doing things that I love, like hunting, fishing, golfing.
Yeah.
It took a good year before I was able to hop back up and start acting like a human being again. I don't remember when Arvis reached out. I'm not sure when that was. Arvis, do you?
We like 2020 or 2021, I think, was it was either early 2021 or late 2020. And I want to draw your attention to one thing. I'm not sure it applies in your case, Mike. I vaguely recall that it did, but Brian, in a lot of these cases, the jury members, we call them a panel in the military, have been so disgusted that they've actually come to some of us to say, look, we had to do it based on what the judge did here. And Micah, can you speak to that? Was that what? I can't recall if yours was one of those.
Yeah. Well, yes, they didn't. Some of my panel members didn't go to you. I actually was going to a church on the west side of San Antonio, and it just so happened that one of the panel members, who used to also be somewhere in my chain of command, I don't remember. I remember who he was. He approached me at church and said, I want you to know that our hands were tied. We were told that we had to convict, and we gave you the lowest possible conviction and sentence that we could based on the information that we had. And if it was up to them, they would have set me free, but they were basically required to get a conviction.
So this sounds.
Brian,
Oh, I was gonna say, it sounds like some top-down stuff was going on, and you said that the panel, the jury,
jury member,
yeah, the jury member was telling you that this is from on high. We have to do this, and we're sorry about it. Okay, I just wanted to get. I mean, it pisses me off, but I'm not gonna rant about it because I'm obviously not the person affected. But this is clearly an injustice. And part of me is like, well, why don't you also step up and like make some noise about this? But I'm not going to do that. So anyway, you were going to say, Arvis, before I interrupted.
So I was going to say, so I want your listeners and people watching this, wherever they are, to consider this. How would you ever trust the military again with your son if you knew with 100% certainty? I want you to imagine that from top down, they looked almost like a quota system to get convictions on men, regardless of what the evidence showed. And I want to back that up a little bit. There was pressure. Senator Kristen Gillibrand of New York, she took Hillary Clinton's seat. She formed a coalition to change the rules. And let me just describe a little bit of what that looked like. If a commander, think admiral, general, senior officer, did not send a case to court-martial in the military, it got reviewed by the TSgt, the head JAGs. So you'll notice President Trump just fired the TSGs in the services for review if you didn't send it. And then also on the Senate Armed Services Committee, if you're a commander going up for promotion, they reviewed your record, right? Kind of like LeBron, and saw what your record was on just sex assaults to see whether you got promoted or not. And they would pull you from the list without saying who did it if you didn't do the right thing, as well as some of these commanders got fired. And I want you to consider what that does to the rank and file, what that does to the force. And at every single level, they did this. A lot of people know what happened on university campus with the Dear Colleague letter, but they don't know what happened in the military. And this last point I'll make before I'm quiet again is something called probable cause. Now, most people don't realize it, but you need probable cause for the police to stop you. You need probable cause for them to arrest you. You certainly need probable cause to go to court. The military is the only entity in the United States that can send a case to court without probable cause. We have a report, we can share it, where this 1 year, 40% of the cases went forward without probable cause. It was supposed to be changed in this NDAA that starting in 2025, and someone removed it. You don't have unanimous juries. The commander gets to was picking the pool of people you choose from. And then on top of that, you could be sent to court-martial without probable cause. And then if you're found not guilty, they can do a board of inquiry. They get multiple bites at the apple, and your accuser gets paid, gets employment opportunities post-military, they get VA benefits, and guess what? They typically get custody of children, houses, etc., and all of their activity is forgiven. Anytime. And I say that point because victims advocates will say there is no perfect victim, but yet they want the accused to be perfect for him to get justice. And that is such a disappointing thing. Is the difference between us and those groups is we are and they are or. Let me explain. We believe you can support true victims and support people who've been falsely accused and wrongly convicted. They believe it's one or the other. And that to me saddens me at a level. And we see things like the Johnny Depp situation. We see it now with Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. You see people, when it's a celebrity, they want to come and says, we support you. We've seen the evidence. Who does that for the military? You want them to keep you safe, but who keeps them safe?
Well said. Um, I wanted to say, with regards to all of the ways in which victims are, let's say, serviced by the military, it sounds like they're incentivized to do this stuff. I mean, when you think about it. So I'm wondering, do you know if this is like common knowledge, like that, if your ex-wife knew that if she went once you came forward and you confronted her about this, is it possible that either A, she knew, oh, well, now I can come after him for these things and I'm going to get, it's like, I can't lose, right? Like I will either, it'll either be thrown out, in which case nobody's penalized, or I will win and I'll get all of this stuff and the kids, and, I don't have to look like a bad person for cheating on my husband. So it's like this saying, that I always say is that, if you want bad behavior, you just incentivize bad behavior and you'll get it. And that's what usually happens. Like, why the divorce courts, whether you're talking about real courts or you're talking about kangaroo courts in the military and on college campuses, whatever, it's almost all the same framework. It's the same foundations on all of them, which is essentially, if the man is accused, we're just going to believe victims. And that's just the reality, because it comes from a feminist academic background. That's why, and I think that it's one of these things too, when the people like Gillibrand, they're saying we have to get convictions because data, I mean, I always bring this up, but it's always worth bringing up and reminding people of, the reason why is because of these Mary Koss studies that were done back in the day, that were printed in Ms. Magazine and these other, like other publications that were essentially supported by three-letter organizations like the CIA, that was essentially saying, 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. And I know that this isn't even your case, which is even wilder, because it's not like any harm was done, but the same mindset is there. It's this, we have to get convictions because we are told this happens a lot, and we're not seeing convictions that match up with, like what is actually happening in reality. Therefore, we have to convict more so that it looks more like this, these studies. And unfortunately, innocent men, and it is men generally, are the ones that are, hurt by this. And it's just to maintain this illusion, which is of this idea of an oppressive patriarchal system. Like, we have to understand that all of this comes from a cult-like, almost religious conviction to these ideas, and real people are harmed by this. But that's where it comes from, and that's what has to be sort of like debunked, right? So, Arvis, you were going to say
2 things real quick, Brian. One, I love your point. And I was going to mention the word victim itself is one of my biggest things, is that even before any evidence has been looked at, they give them the label of victim instead of accuser. That's one. And then number 2, to your point about the statistics, they do surveys without telling you the assumptions they took to get the numbers. And I'll prove it to you. Years ago, they would say only 2% of sexual or false allegations. So in some things I looked into, it was how did they get 2%? And in some of those studies, the accuser had to admit that they lied in order. And if the evidence showed they were false accusers, that was deemed inconclusive. So at first they said 2%. They anchored you to that number. Then they said 2 to 5%, but they still anchored you to 2. Then they said 2 to 8, and now they're saying 2 to 10. And so to your point, you're right. They will use those surveys, those small surveys, without telling you how they got the number. And most people never answer the question. They take it at face value. And you end up with cases like Micah's and the thousands of other men in the military that this has happened to.
Yes. So I want to ask, if you are, look, Micah, I think this is absolutely a horrible injustice that's happened. I'm, kind of seething about it, but I'm going to try to be productive. So instead of ranting about this, because I know ideologically, I know where this comes from, and that's what has to change. And unfortunately, we're trying to essentially disentangle a rat's nest that is probably older than we are. Like it's probably existed since before we were born. But I think that the more we talk about these things, which is like my primary goal is to just encourage these conversations, the closer we could get to untangling it. But what I want to ask you guys, both of you, you just mentioned, because this is all like this stuff that's happening, it's a holdover from previous administrations in terms of like that effect. Are you at all optimistic now that we have a change in, you know, like who's running things? In particular, I don't know if it's Pete Hegseth that would be like the guy when it comes to this, but do you, because the thing is, okay, this obstacle, this is like really going to be tricky, okay? What people have to be able to do, and this is hard no matter where you stand politically for most people, is to be able to see that women are capable of doing evil. Like that they're capable of doing it, okay? And that they're not only that, but that there are systems in place that encourage them to do it and tell them that they are right for using these systems because they are, you know, born into a position of victimhood, and that men at any point as a collective will, you know, oppress them again. And this is something that is embedded into us every single day, constantly, from the moment we're born. Like it's everywhere, right? It's ubiquitous. Like if you said, you know, women can be evil too sometimes, some people would be like, what? You know, like, I mean, I know it sounds wild, but so, like, for example, I think that where this is birthed from in terms of like the actual, like, say, policy, things that are written down, okay, it's an attitude that we have to change up here. But there are some, like, say, administrative or legal things that we can at least talk about. Some movements, for example, the Violence Against Women Act is like where that is an ideological piece of like magic, essentially, because violence is already illegal. So why do we have an act that's like specifically for women? And that's where these things are exploited, right? And the problem is that if you criticize that, people's reaction will be, you know, oh, you're for being violent to women. And it's like, no, I think that there's injustice baked into this because it treats this group of people as a special class, right? While claiming that they are underserved at the same time. So, okay, let me back up because I just ranted a bit. But what do you think about the current, you know, like Trump is back in office. He seems to mean business. It looks like it's a different vibe than what it was in 2016. He's going in hard for a number of reasons. He's got good people on his team that look like they have a particular focus. So firstly, are you at all optimistic? Secondly, do you have any intentions to, like, you know, be involved like with those people? So
I'll go
whoever
first.
wants to talk, you go first. Yeah.
I'll go first, Arvis, because I know that you got a lot more to say on this than I do. I will tell you that Trump doesn't seem like he means business. He does mean business, and he meant business his first term. And now I believe, based on how he was treated during that term and after that term and during this past election, he means even more business than he did the first time around. And am I optimistic that this administration is going to help us? More so by a long shot than the past administration, for sure.
Absolutely.
Do I think we're going to get help? I don't know. I mean, it's just, you just never know what's going to happen. I mean, regardless why this particular campaign of ours, and Arvis, I'm sure you can back me up on this, is so difficult, is because we have to take, regardless of who you are, where you live, what kind of position you're in your career, and so on and so forth, our duty is to ourselves and our families, and we have to take care of ourselves and our families first before we take care of other people. If we always put other people first and put our career up there for people to bat around, then it's going to get batted around. And I think these politicians and these lawyers don't want to put their careers on the line to step up and help those that are quote unquote criminals of with sexual bad conduct stigma on their mind. So
Yeah.
it's very difficult to say whether we're going to get help or not, because there's not too many people that are willing to put their lives and their families and their careers on the line for people such as us. However, I believe in Donald Trump. I believe he doesn't have to be president. He doesn't have to do anything. He could play golf every day for the rest of his life if he wanted to, but he's not. He's trying to change this country for the better. I believe in him 100%. And I think if anybody is going to help us, it's going to be him and his administration. Arvis.
Okay, thank you. Great responses. There's 3 points I want to make to kind of support you. So first question, do I believe that Secretary of Defense Hegseth and President Donald Trump more likely to help us than others? I do. I just believe with what they've shown so far, they're more likely to understand what happened and be willing to come forward because, like I said, they have experience in it. Second thing I will say, and maybe 4 things instead of 3, I miscounted, is that the hard part for them will be the American people have to be educated that this happened. I mean, so the hard part for them is to do it without first ensuring the American people are educated to know what happened. And that's a challenge because, again, I'll ask your audience, how can you trust the military again if you know that's happening? So it's an all volunteer force. So if it's an all volunteer force and you know they're doing things like this, are you going to let your son join? Or how could you? And we don't advocate for people not to join. We say, ask the recruiter, what are you doing for false allegations and wrongful convictions? How easy is it to get sharp? So educating the people. Another thing is that women have to say enough. Women have to say, we believe, true people who have been assaulted, but we also know that there are some people who make false allegations and they should be punished too. And I'll parallel that with Title IX. So we remember all the changes to Title IX by the previous administration. And then there was one change where women said enough, and then it reverted back. You guys know what that change was? It was transgender athletes playing women's sport.
Yeah.
So they were okay when you took away the due process from men, right? So they were okay with all of the other changes, but when they did that one, they said enough, and it changed, right? And then the last thing I will say too is you said it earlier, Brian, that it takes a mental shift to understand this, like what happened. And so that is what I am most hesitant about is people understanding. And so using the military as a guide, on the one hand, they don't want to admit this, right? It's impossibly hard for them to admit this because then it would hurt the all-volunteer force. And if it hurts the all-volunteer force, you have to draft. And then tell me which politician wants to put their name on it. So yes, I believe that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are more likely than anyone to do something positive for us. It will be hard, I think, even for them, because you have to educate the people or they'll just attack him for it. They'll attack Secretary Hegseth and say, why are you doing this? Because they don't know what happened. And again, women have to say enough. We don't support false allegations. We don't want to be associated with people who make false allegations. I personally believe those who make false allegations should be put on the registry. They should be punished and sent to prison for all of the time that the person was. So I know that was a long answer to your question, and I hope the answer came and was clear to your audience.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with all of that. I think that again, it comes down to incentives. We incentivize bad behavior, we're going to get bad behavior. So we should be very careful about that. And I don't. Again, we're trying to undo a lot of programming, so it's not going to happen overnight. I do believe that it's a really simple thing, right? So the Trump administration believes that we need to have a strong military, and they're trying to make the military strong, right? they're not making it another, it's just like at least for the last administration, it seemed to be just another avenue to get free, transgender healthcare or whatever. And that's why people were joining, because they wanted the free stuff. And this is not what it's supposed to be. Like, if there's one thing a country has to have, it's a military to protect the people, right? So, and there are plenty of men that want to fight for the country, but they don't like the way that they're being treated by the country as it stands. And you can look at other countries. For example, I just covered in a news story yesterday where, we have this stuff going on with Ukraine and Russia, and Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of England or Britain, is like, well, we're prepared to put boots on the ground and planes in the air, right? And it's like, yeah, but how have you been treating like the men of your country? They're not going to want to fight for you, right? And so like it's obviously, when you attack men in the abstract constantly, you demoralize them, they're not going to want to fight for your country. I mean, the United States, in the US at least, the majority of men who join the military tend to be Christians, they tend to be white, and they tend to be from rural areas. That's where the patriotism is at for the most part. And that's the group was getting the most attacked, like over the course of the last, decade or so. So when we ended up in a situation where we might go to war, it's like, oh, look, October 7th happened, and it's like, we need to send guys to Israel or whatever, to Gaza. And all the men were like, hell no. And they even changed the advertising to match that. I don't know if you remember, but there was like, advertising for the army, for example. Well, I think they had like this animated thing where it was about a girl and her two mothers, and it was like a pride thing, and she wanted to join the military, and it was all very like weird and woke. And then when we were actually on the cusp of war, all of a sudden it was like white dudes jumping out of helicopters, and it was like super masculine, right? So obviously they know that men, you need men to be in your military. You need a masculine military. It's just the facts. I'm sorry. It just is, right? And in order for them to have a strong military, they're going to have to like respond to that. They're going to have to essentially try to create a sense that, men who want to fight for this country deserve to be treated like human beings, like with all the respect and all that comes with. And I mean, I'm fairly certain that Trump and Hegseth understand that. So I want to get your comments on your reaction to something else, because I think that we talk a lot in today's world about lots of things going on in the world, lots of things dealing with politics and geopolitics and race and sexuality and all that. I firmly believe that everything that we're talking about boils down to the relationship between men and women. That's it. That's where it starts from. That's the genesis, as it were. Okay. And if we don't address that, then none of the other stuff matters. Like none of the other stuff matters. And that means that we have to address men's issues and as early as birth, really. And like looking at them as people that have their unique perspective, their unique way of living in the world, their unique way of affecting the world. Like the masculine energy is all but, gone, because it's being suppressed so hard because it's seen as evil. But JD Vance spoke at CPAC recently on February 20th. Did you go to that, Arvis? Did you go to CPAC in this year, February 20th?
I did not. I had another obligation. I did have a couple of people I know who did go.
Okay, because I know you and I talked about CPAC like when we met up for lunch that one time. But okay, so in Maryland, he said the war on men is absolutely over. And this comment made during a speech was highlighted in posts found on X all over February. And they thought it was a very significant message. A conservative outlet called Conservative HQ reported Vance saying, quote, "I think that our culture sends a message to young men that you should suppress every masculine urge. You should try to cast aside your family. You should try to suppress what makes you a young man in the first place. And I think that my message to young men is don't allow this broken culture to send you a message that you're a bad person because you're a man. because you like to tell a joke, because you like to have a beer with your friends, or because you are competitive, end quote. So I think this is significant because for a long time, I've been doing this for 10 years. For a long time, nobody in the political space would even like approach talking about men in a way that is supportive or even sympathetic. Because it just wasn't good for their career as politicians. Like, appealing to women is how you get votes. That's just the reality. Most of them, they're more likely to vote. There's more of them, so, you know, appeal to them. And for some reason, people got this idea that appealing to women means tearing down men. So, or not talking about them at all, even though there are women who have sons and, you know, whatever. And then I think Josh Hawley, he did a speech a few years ago where he basically went on and on about men. And I was like seeing this, you know, I remember even Trump at one point in his first term, he said men have a lot of problems and we should be like talking about this more. And I thought that was great because it meant that people are starting to like find their spines and say something, because this is extremely important. So what do you think about JD Vance's words there? And I know they're just words, but you know,
I'll jump in there. So one, it's encouraging. What I was thinking about as you said it was starting January 1st, 2025. It was in the last NDAA. What they did was they criminalized sexual harassment in the military, that you would serve 2 years in prison and get a dishonorable discharge. So they weren't getting as many sexual assault convictions as they wanted. So they added a sexual harassment clause. And so you could be punished for sexual harassment if you look at someone for too long. I don't know if it's 3 potatoes or 4 potatoes. If you were to tell a dirty joke behind a closed door, let's say, and someone on the other side heard that you didn't know, that constitutes sexual harassment. And so you're right. I hear what he's saying, and that's very positive. And the action, though, to take those laws and rules and really take a hard look at them. And then I'll add this piece with it. It's one thing to say we're going to stop doing something, and another to say we're going to address the people who have been impacted. The metaphor I use is an arsonist. Imagine an arsonist has burned thousands of homes, and then they go, okay, someone talks to them. They're not going to burn any more homes going forward. But do they repair the homes that they burned in the past?
Right.
So I think you got to have both of those. That's what I would add. And then my last point about why it's healthy to have this conversation about men. We have people inside the military. I'm working on an interview for one now who've shared with us that the suicide rate among men getting these false allegations is going up. It's through the roof. And so what he is saying is important. And I can't stress enough how women, we would like them to get on board. Again, we support true victims. We believe that no one should be sexually assaulted or harassed. But again, until we get both coming together saying enough, they're never going to make that change.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a long ways to go. It's so bad. So look, Brian, I'm a competitive golfer, and we have a fairly large tour down here in South Texas that with a lot of competitive golfers, and they're mostly civilians. There's a few military that participate, but most of them are civilians. And the thing now is men are so scared. Even not just military, but civilian men are now so scared to even say you are first on the scene to a car accident. Men are scared to even help a female that has been injured or is choking or whatever the issue is.
Daniel Penny.
They've seen stories and seen
yeah,
other men go to prison for trying to help somebody in distress because they and then the woman turns around and charges them with some type of sexual assault or harassment or whatever it ends up being. It's absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah. I mean, you guys again on point. Arvis, you unmuted. I guess you wanted to say something else to that.
Again, I'll use the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni situation, which people may be aware of in the news. Is my understanding, and I can be wrong, was she alleged sexual harassment because he came into her trailer while she was pumping breast milk. And he produced text messages and evidence to show that she invited him to come to her trailer and said, I'm only pumping breast milk. And then when he got to the door of the trailer, knocked on it to come in, he said, are you sure? And he had a witness, and she said yes. And that, but it's the idea that she feels empowered enough to make that allegation in this environment, that we've created that environment that she feels that I'll get away with this. I think I'm comfortable. And again, we don't know the details. I'm speculating, but I'm going by what's been out there. It's look at what he's had to do to respond to this.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what Johnny Depp had to do to respond to that. And what about all of the men who suffer in silence, who don't have the resources? They don't have a fan base. And so it is amazing to me in a way that I can't even explain.
Yeah.
But it's yeah.
Yeah. They've done studies that show that suggest anyways that false allegations of sexual assault, the psychological harm that does to someone who's falsely accused is on par with someone who's actually been sexually assaulted. Like if you remember when Brett Kavanaugh was up for the Supreme Court and there were people slinging allegations against him and he was weeping, I believe at points. He was likely very traumatized. It's tremendously stressful on the individual and all of their relationships. Can you imagine what his kids were going through? Can you imagine what his wife was going through? You know, that maybe even got to the point where they were questioning this. Like this is like it's not something you play around with. You know, this does real
Brian,
harm.
I was thinking about something Micah said, to where we have men in our group who cannot be alone with women they're not related to. You know, he talked about accidents. They can't date, nor do, and they have trouble dating if they wanted to, because women, what are they to think when they see, hey, you've been convicted of this, and you have to convince them you were falsely accused. So they no longer trust, you know, looking, saying, being around women at all. And we've had people describe to me that they have more PTSD because of that false allegations, to your point, than they do from combat.
Mm-hmm.
At least they knew who the enemy was in combat.
Yeah, right.
And they could fire back.
Mm-hmm.
With this, they cannot fire back.
I'm one of those people, Arvis and Brian. I am one of those people. And the effect that this situation has had on my life outweighs the effects of what I went through in Afghanistan and Iraq and Kuwait and all the places that I've been. I mean, just that stuff's still with me, for sure. I will never forget. But when you're away from home, you kind of go into those situations thinking, well, I'm doing this away from home. I'm going to get this done, and then I'm going to go back home to my safe haven, to my refuge, and I'm going to be safe again. That's not the case anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel safe anymore. And I used to be a very generous and helpful guy. And now I have to think before every situation, what's going to happen to me if I get involved in this situation? Am I putting myself and my family at risk again by getting involved in this situation? And it's sad. It's a sad state that we are in. Yeah.
Well, one last question, Micah. Are you still in contact with your children?
I am not. It's a constant struggle. Every year I go wherever they're living. I try to go up and try and find them and contact them and spend time with them. I send emails, I send text messages. And at this point in time, I don't even know where they all live. But I'm not giving up. I'm still searching. I'm still paying attention to social media, trying to find my children, trying to keep track of my children. I'm not giving up hope. I want to be their father. I love them dearly, more than anything in this world. And I just hope and pray that one day we can be reunited and reconcile and put all this behind us.
Do you think that it's possible that your ex turned your kids against you? Or do you think that they might also be trying to find you?
It is 100% the case that she turned them against me.
Mm.
I did spend some time with my middle child, and after all this has happened, and she informed me of a lot of conversations that took place with my ex-wife and my three kids, and how they were to see me, um, who I was, what I did, why I'm not a good person, why I'm not a good father, why I shouldn't be in their lives anymore, so on and so forth. So she definitely played a very large part. The prosecution in my case actually tried to get my children involved in my conviction, and they all three refused. So that should tell you something right there. But um, they somehow, some way, were just influenced to the extent that it's what year are we on now? We're
2025. So
2025. So we're 9 years later, and I still don't have a relationship with my first three children.
well, yeah, I mean, I don't really have any words for that. I've always wanted kids. I can't have kids. I had cancer. But yeah, I'm sure that that's got to be really tough. Have you been in contact with Terrence Pop? Have you tried I don't know if you I know that Arvis has, but have you, Micah, been on his show or spoke to him?
I have not.
Oh, it might be worth checking out. Go ahead, Arvis.
So I was going to answer that. So what Terrence has asked about other cases, so I submitted to him a list, and we're working through that now. Terrence has been absolutely amazing. His show is also incredible. So thank you for that connection. So he has a summary of Micah's cases as well as several others, and we're
Yeah.
going through there. He has been a tremendous supporter. If it's okay, Brian, I was gonna make a quick ask of the audience if I could do that.
Yep.
So, one, if you could please share this show to everybody you like and even people you don't like,
Yeah.
and have them share it and keep sharing it, we would be appreciative because this word has to get out. Number two, we have a petition, www.change.org/unjust UCMJ, where you see my case, Micah, several others, and we reference the thousands of other people who are part of this in the comments, and sign and share that as well. And if you know politicians, media personalities, if you will please get them this video, we have more people who are willing to come forward, and we want to thank you for sticking with us and listening. And again, Brian, thank you for having the courage to put this out, because a lot of people I found out get funded by the military, a lot of media sources, a lot of nonprofits I had no idea, ones I grew up trusting my whole life. They get extensive federal funds, a lot of it from DOD. They will not put this story out because they believe it'll jeopardize their funding. So
Yep.
thank you again, and thank your audience.
Yeah,
Thank you,
well,
Micah. Thank you,
thank
Micah.
you. Yeah, thank you, Micah, for coming and sharing your story, and thank you, Arvis, for just like introducing me to these fascinating people and their wild stories. And I just hope that this will have an impact at some point. I think it is. I think that people are seeing this stuff, and eventually it's going to get to the right person, and they're going to basically be like, hey, we need to do something about this. So we'll just keep on swinging as as it goes. So I want to we're gonna wrap it up here. This has gone a little bit longer than normal, but I'm okay with that. It's fine. I thought it was worth doing. Again, Micah, do you have any final words before I wrap it up?
I just want to reiterate what Arvis has touched on, that listeners out there that think that my story is appalling. Um, there are, and during my time when I was incarcerated and after, I have met some amazing men that have similar, and in a lot of cases, more appalling stories than mine. And I am just, I'm still emotional about it. And I've grown to love these men, and I want this show, my story, to just help propel this situation and bring light to what's going on. And so all of these men that are affected by these false allegations can have some sort of relief down the road. This is why I'm doing this.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. It's really a treasure. And all right, so we got to wrap it up here, guys. But please be sure to share this video. You know, it's like the one thing I ask. And if you can't, or I mean, if you're able, give this a like, and so that maybe it'll, you know, do a little bit more favorably in the YouTube algorithm. So anyway, if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel, hit the bell so that you can be notified when our streams go live, and leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about the story. There are links that we just talked about, the change.org, and all that is in the description of this video. And share this video once again, because sharing is caring. Thank you to Micah and Arvis for coming on the show. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll talk to you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.